all members of society is the positive vision of the freely associated social individuals in need of a totality of human life activities, who would fulfill their autonomously determined task in community with each other, on the basis of their inner necessity, their real need. Equality is another category of fundamental socialist relevance, with a very long period of historical gestation. Understandably, it is closely connected with the question of genuinely self-fulfilling productive activity in the life of the individuals. To be sure, it was originally conceived as substantive equality, for it was advocated as a type of human relationship suitable to significantly diminish the discriminatory constraints and contradictions, thereby enriching the life of the individuals not only in material terms, but also as a result of introducing a greater degree of fairness and justice in their interchanges with one another. Of course, there was also an obvious class aspect to these concerns, arguing in favor of the elimination of some pre-established and ossified measures and rules of subjection and subordination. It postulated the improvement of the general conditions of well-being in society, thanks to a more enlightened and less conflict-torn management of its problems, in contrast to later reversals, which, as a diametrical opposite, asserted that any attempt at spreading equality would unavoidably result in leveling down, and thus bring with it the creation of insuperable conflict. The a prioristically disqualifying accusations which asserted the necessary connection between introducing a greater degree of substantive equality and the equitable distribution of misery were a typical manifestation of this line of approach, reflecting the actually existing relation of forces overwhelmingly on the side of the iniquitous established order. The brutal liquidation of François Babeu's secret society of equals was also a clear indication of how negatively the fate of these pressing for substantive equality was sealed with the entrenchment of the new forms of inequality in the immediate aftermath of the French Revolution. Capital stabilized socioeconomic order, firmly securing the structural subordination of the subjected class of labor, could not offer scope for anything but the most restricted measures of strictly formal equality, confined to the legitimation of the contractual subjugation of the workers to the dominant material interest. This is how one of the great promises of the Enlightenment movement ended its days as a distant memory of a noble illusion. However, this is by no means the end of the story itself. For with the appearance of organized labor on the historical stage, with its claims to be the carrier of a viable hegemonic alternative socio-economic, political and cultural order, the issue of substantive equality has been reopened in a radically different way. It has been reopened in the form of asserting not the equality of classes, but the necessity to put an end altogether to class inequality as such, through the establishment of a classless society. Accordingly, the issue is defined in this revived form as most emphatically the advocacy of substantive equality. And this is not a desideratum. For the fact is that the envisaged socialist societal order is totally unworkable in any other way. In other words, the alternative in this respect is that either the idea of instituting a qualitatively different classless social metabolic order must be completely abandoned as an untenable illusion, just like the great illusions of the Enlightenment movement, or it must be practically articulated and firmly consolidated in all of its major aspects as a historically, also in the long run, sustainable society based on substantive equality. The reason for presenting the issue in the form of this stark alternative is absolutely compelling. For the accusations leveled against those who maintain their concern with the realization of substantive equality as hopeless idealists and utopian dreamers who are tied to the remnants of an Enlightenment illusion, they are not just conveniently fashionable, even though they certainly are. There is a much more serious aspect to this kind of behind the smiling face, in fact most aggressive, and beneath the velvet glove iron-fisted critique. For in its fallacious apologetics of the established order, it purports to be in no need of proving and substantiating its categorically dismissive position, assuming in its own favor that a vacuous disqualifying reference to an allegedly forever buried past, the unforgivably illusory Enlightenment movement, makes any proof utterly superfluous. This is one of the favorite methodological devices in the service of justifying the unjustifiable. In this way, a vital terrain of practically most important theoretical contestation is ruled arbitrarily out of bounds on account of simply being connected with an intellectual tradition which in its time tried to genuinely respond to some major problems and grievances of the given social order, even if it was unable to do it without postulating its own illusions for solving them. The fact that the disqualified past, dismissed in the more or less visibly camouflaged interest of disqualifying the present, in truth belongs to the long historical gestation of a socially irrepressible concern, and that a legitimate critic of the Enlightenment should investigate why its solutions had to be in many ways illusory, due to the underlying class determinations. All that cannot be even mentioned. For what must be hidden from sight is the circumstance that the issue of equality itself concerns a strategically crucial orienting principle of the necessary qualitative transformation of the untenable established order, even if the imperative of that order's radical supersession, oriented by the principle of not formal but substantive equality, can only be spelled out at the present stage of historical development in the form of our stark alternative. For by a prioristically disqualifying all concerned with equality, they can easily do the same to all of the other seminal orienting principles of a sustainable socialist transformation of society, closely linked to the requirements of substantive equality. Redefining the fundamental conditions of the historically viable